Dune Awakening just had an exclusive dev interview, and it goes over upcoming features and DLC content, new quality of life which includes crafting, base building, and management, and that also includes both PvP and PvE, as well as what isn't in the pipeline and plans. We'll deep dive on each and every question and then do a full overview to recap. We got a ton to talk about. What's up world, it's Joe here back with another video. Today we're checking out all things Dune Awakening. Okay, so let's just jump into it. We had the Reddit AMA and dev interview that included a multitude of developers here, from the creative director, executive producer, senior game developer, and even lead producer. Again, which goes over a ton of new things coming to Dune Awakening. For the first question here, we had what are the quality of life plans in the pipeline, and what are some PvE plans in the near future. They said they have an update currently in testing that contains a bunch of quality of life fixes. They do plan to release that one in early July. For PvE, they do have a bunch of future plans and major updates that will continue the new story content, as well as some new PvE content. At the same time, the DLC will come out, and their goal is to have new PvE content there every 3 to 4 months. So kind of akin to World of Warcraft and some other MMOs, which is a fairly decent cadence there. Now there are some players who do play solo, so there was a question here about planning on adding weekly contracts for solo players. They do mention that currently they offer weekly contracts for players to engage with. They have read some feedback on this with some tasks getting locked early, tasks being too hard for solo players. So they do mention the feedback there has been very good, so they do want to add some additional things there with PvE content and have some more dynamic encounters in the game that will offer a variety of new content. This one is quite massive for the PvP players in the deep desert. This person asked, was there any idea or change to make the Scout Ornithopter weaponless? They first off say here their plan is to remove rockets from the Scout Ornithopter. It's also going to affect maneuverability, speed, which will make the Assault Thopter a better choice when you want to engage in combat, as you currently can just slap rockets on the Scout version, and it's a lot cheaper overall. They do say they want players to make a meaningful decision there, and once a player does engage in PvP, they want the experience to be reliable, responsive, and clearly understood. They also do want to have it to be more ground combat, and they're going to continue addressing movement, desync, and riverband issues there. Currently, yeah, the PvP is a bit rough in the game. It really is just rocketing with ornithopters, and those take even a few hours sometimes in some cases, and eventually someone can just run away. To top it off, you can just make rockets on a Scout Ornithopter, which makes it a lot cheaper than the Assault one, so a lot of issues to address there. Hopefully they do fix that sometime soon. Partially why I've lost the motivation to continue playing at least a ton, as kind of farming for T6 kind of felt useless, as the PvP in the game just seems really off base right now. Hopefully they do address that endgame sometime soon. Next question here is on storage naming and even vehicle naming, where they do say that vehicle naming is also something they've been looking into, and they do also want to add storage naming as well to improve with base resource management there. There's a few systems in place for the storage system right now. You can use a circuit system and other notable mentions there, but yeah, it would help to actually name your crates and chests. This also hits on my previous point here where someone mentions that the big issue with PvP in the DD right now, or in the deep desert, essentially is just ornithopter aircraft fights, and they can be very boring at times. They do say here the deep desert will always stay PvP free for all area, but they might consider some other locations for the factional warfare. Again, I really do think they need to address this sometime soon, as players hit this endgame barrier. I do think they might see a drop off in player count, as there really just isn't much endgame there overall. Again, this also hits on that. This is a ton of concerns, at least for a lot of players, that the deep desert is aircraft only, and they don't really have any buggies or ground combat. And they even featured this during the trailer, oddly enough, people in the deep desert fighting on the ground. They do say here, no, this is not currently the plan. However, they do want to address some of the balancing here. They'll also, of course, continue to add dungeons. Kind of disappointed with this response. I was really hoping that they would kind of hone in on the ground combat. Right now, there just isn't much to strive for in the deep desert. At least in my opinion there, it seems like PvP is really stale in the endgame overall. To move past the deep desert discussion, we had some base building things here. Someone asks, is there any plans to make base building a little bit easier? They do say that they're planning to add options to replace one piece with another without having to destroy it first. There's some decent quality of life there. That includes this comment on will we be able to stack storage boxes. They mentioned that you can do that already using half walls to create shelves, but they'll continue to look in ways to do quality of life changes. Moving on here, we had a question around the vehicular movement. This person mentions that they kind of just want to walk around the desert and they want something like sand walking. Seems like they do plan to add walking without rhythm eventually. Maybe some gear that you can wear, so if you do want to just walk around the desert, you can. Speaking of the deep desert again, this person asks, are they going to add options for duels? And they answer with yes, they do plan to add the ability to actually duel somebody. This one has been one of my largest frustrations, but it's the deposit all water option. Spam clicking your mouse doesn't really feel that good. but they do say that they're absolutely going to add this, and they will add a deposit all water option that is coming very soon. This one hits on a beat for all this stuff coming out here, or all these things getting labeled. Will there be a roadmap that we can see eventually? And they say yes, they intend to keep you on the loop of what's coming, and they will share a mid to long term plan soon. However, this may not take the form of a static roadmap asset. A lot of times when games like this try to follow a roadmap, they're usually very late, or they end up not putting everything out there. Although I would like to see somewhat of a roadmap, or at least some showcase of future content. Again, my main concern with the game right now is the endgame and the motivation there. It has some great bones overall and some structure, but that's the same way that New World was when that came out. It had really good structurization, but they just didn't deliver with content. That is my main worry with Dune Awakening right now. Do they have the actual endgame content to provide? Although we'll have to wait and see. Again, I will keep you guys updated throughout this. Here's kind of a massive bug that people went over. Someone says here, right now respecking removes your starting skill, but it does not refund the skill point. So if you respec at level 150, you only get 149 points back. They do mention this is definitely a bug and it will be fixed in an upcoming patch. So we'll have to wait and see if they just add a skill point or if they reset everyone's skill tree. Typically that happens when they do one of these massive patches. Speaking of the overall map, the deep desert, and everything else, this person asks, are there any plans for a map expansion? They do say here that they have plans to expand the game with additional maps in the future. They do even go on and say the Dune universe has a lot of interesting locations and worlds to explore, so they are looking forward to continue building on that for the foreseeable future. One of the last notes here before the full overview, they mention that right now taking a break from the game feels a bit crushing and even tedious and discouraging. They do mention that the game supports you taking a break for almost 4 weeks, that you can fuel your base fully with a high tier generator before your base actually gets unpowered and has to default on your taxes. They're going to be adding more mechanics in the future to support easier recovery. Another notable mention here is if you can server transfer your character to a different server or siege. They do mention that Between Sieges is coming soon, where you'll have full visiting with building rights, and Between Worlds will likely be possible in the future, but not in the short term. So if you're on a world right now and you don't want to be on that world, you more than likely should just remake your character. Now, if we do a general overview of everything, this does include some questions that I didn't bring in here, but this hits on all of the notes. So the overview and the key takeaway from this and the key developer goals, they're going to have quarterly updates, major content drops that happen every 3 to 4 months, each with new PvE story content and mechanics. The Deep Desert will remain a PvP endgame zone, but PvE players will have alternative progression path, Landsrath updates, and new zones. So don't fret there, hopefully they are going to add some more endgame there. They do mention that Landsrath is intended to be the core PvE endgame loop, show those contracts that your guilds can take, but the devs acknowledge it needs refinement. The next big patch here is scheduled for early July, full of quality of life changes and balance patches. So nothing in terms of endgame content there. Again, a little bit unfortunate. I do wish they had something in the pipeline to give us there, or at least some more notable mentions on that. We'll have to wait and see overall, but I really do think this game might need another year in the oven in order to provide that endgame that will be sufficient. We'll have to wait and see again though, but my hope is that they actually do bring out a ton of new endgame. For the quality of life highlights here and what they're going to be bringing here sometime soon, building and base management is getting a lot of reworks here. You'll be able to replace building pieces and even stack storage boxes, although you can do that already via half wall. That includes some new buttons for depositing all water and all blood, some additional things there for vehicle and storage container namings, and also being able to search your containers by item name. It also seems like sometime soon you'll have a cosmetic surgeon for appearance changes, so if you do regret what you did originally, you'll be able to change that eventually. Two things here that aren't being added: a top-down building view has not been planned, and a build all button won't be added either to preserve the co-op aspects. Next up here we have the inventory and crafting section. They're eventually going to add a quick unload feature for vehicles. There's going to be some fix for the accidental Chris knife on equips and the storage. There'll also be some exchange improvements where you can sell from your vehicle storage. So just by arriving at a trade post and probably being in the vicinity, you'll be able to sell from that. There's also going to be a mass seat swap hotkey for vehicles, planned for July or August. Definitely will help for mining. What they're currently not adding for this is dual volume or slot storage systems. Those will stay the way they are for balance reasons. Next up here we have the PvP content and the Deep Desert, where again, as I mentioned, the Scout Ornithopter will actually lose a lot of abilities here. If they do or have rockets equipped, it seems like they might even be removing that entirely. They're going to lose maneuverability. They'll gain some speeds though when thrusters are spec'd into. As of right now, it seems like thrusters only help you with the initial boost, but not later on. maybe they mean for that to equip that. You'll also be able to become more specialized for recon or combat. Their overall PvP goals is to encourage meaningful loadouts and risk. They really need to fix that desync and rubber band issues that's planned. And they're also going to improve classes across the board here for reliability. Currently, what is not planned is faction-based warfare or the DD size reduction. People think the Deep Desert is way too large. I definitely agree with that. You rarely ever encounter a player even when you're in there. And when you do, it's only air combat and you can just leave. Yeah, not a huge fan with that. I think the Deep Desert needs a full rework. I think they're going to get this feedback forever, and eventually when the player count does dip because of it, I do think we'll see a full rework with the DD. They also mentioned there are no plans to have full loot PvP unless passed via the Lands Rad Decree. Again, as I mentioned in my previous videos, you do have to be careful. If there is a Lands Rad Decree, you can actually loot everything on a player. That has to be that one specific decree though. Do watch out for that one. Next up here, we have the PvE features and future plans. So for the general PvE content overall, there's going to be new contracts, story quests, boss encounters with each major update. Again, those are going to happen every 3 to 4 months. Dynamic world encounters during exploration, more dungeons with bosses, but no targeted loot systems. The randomization there is intentional. They also do mention that the Act 3 of the story will release gradually for free alongside DLCs. This isn't planned, but under consideration, procedural missions and Radiant contracts, meaning they'll be randomly generated. Currently, no PvE versions of the Deep Desert, and no plans for instancing final trial quests just yet. For the PvE section here, we actually do have solo-friendly adjustments. I know a lot of people, including myself, are solo players. Although I have joined a guild on and off, I do enjoy somewhat of a solo experience at some points. They do mention that contributions to Lands Rad is now being rolled over every week. Lands Rad to be updated for better solo guild balance. There's going to be some new PvE map zones post Haga Basin for T6 progression, so eventually you will be able to earn some T6 gear, at least not having to go to the Deep Desert. They're also making adjustments for vehicle loss from crashes or disconnects. Some players have had issues there overall. Again, as of right now, the Deep Desert has no solo PvE endgame zones planned. There's some additional notable mentionables here. Dual wielding is confirmed but limited to match weapon types. New archetypes for trainers in development, emotes, cosmetics, social hub expansions. They're even going to add dispenser elevators likely coming to a player base. So pretty cool there, you'll be able to traverse a lot easier. Free movement between sietches in some worlds coming soon. Again, we do have that Fremen stealth mechanic or sand walking under consideration. There is that third faction coming, but it is not that House Corono. No minimap is being planned or dynamic HUD, and no in-game cosmetic store planned for right now. That's pretty cool and pretty nice on them that they're not actually adding any additional cosmetics there. For system and performance right now, they are doing some additional things there. Vehicle render distance and DD being looked into. Right now, if they really want to keep it in aircraft stuff or aircraft PvP, they need to substantially increase the render distance by tenfold. Hopefully they can figure that one out. Server merges are not imminent, but the balanced populations are being planned, as well as server infrastructure and architecture that is too complex for public hosting right now. So pretty cool overall. I hope I hit on all the notes there for the dev interview and dev Q&A. Curious on your guys' thoughts of this overall. And if you enjoyed today's video, like, and subscribe, and until the next one. Deuces.